Welcome to the initial edition of Trunk and Tales as we see what's happening in the world of national politics. I'm Stacy Smith, and with me to talk about this is my panel of political analysts and experts, and let me introduce them to you. They are the former governor of Pennsylvania, Tom Corbett. He's a Republican. He also served as the state attorney general and also as the U.S. attorney for the Western District of Pennsylvania. Mr. Corbett teaches law right now. Also with me is Jim Byrne. Jim is the chairman emeritus of the Democratic Party of Pennsylvania. He also served in county and city governments, and Jim now practices law in Pittsburgh. And Keith Schmidt was the state director for former Republican Senator Rick Santorum. Keith also consulted Santorum on his 2012 presidential campaign. I want to thank you all for joining us for this initial edition of Trunk and Tales. Let us begin with a look at the latest in the presidential race and the latest in the decision by a federal judge in Florida to indefinitely postpone the Trump classified document case. So, Jim, I know you're a Democrat, and we can argue over the legal procedures of this, you and the governor, because you're both great attorneys. But instead, let's talk about what this does politically to the campaign. What are your thoughts?
Sure. As this is our first gathering under this Trunk and Tales, I thank you, Stacy, and Governor and Keith and Professor Mystic at some point for putting this together. I just think that this is a timely podcast, and it gives us an opportunity to talk about issues, and all of us with our respective backgrounds, Stacy, yours and the governors and Keith's and the professors. I'm really optimistic that this avenue that you've created for us gives all of us an opportunity to share our thoughts and bring some civil discourse to our respective political views. So thank you very much. Now, thanks for the filibuster. Now, to let me filibuster. Now, to answer your question, politically speaking, of course, the Democrats are going to be frustrated. They're going to point to this judge. They're going to talk about a perception of bias. They'll make those type of arguments. The GOP will certainly push back, and some on the extreme right will say, well, the whole thing is fixed and it's a witch hunt anyway. But at the end of the day, this, in my opinion, simply breaks down to issues and difficulties, primarily with some scheduling and some loose ends that they're trying to do ahead of a trial date that just aren't tied up just yet. I would think, though, however, I would submit outside of politics that it's the judge could have put a timetable on this. I'm going to kick it back 30, 60, 90 days, and I expect these loose ends and these conflicts to be resolved. An indefinite postponement does raise, politically speaking, some eyebrows, in my opinion.
So what I'll say is, having been a federal prosecutor, both as an assistant and as a United States attorney, I don't understand this delay. And I'm disappointed that the court hasn't explained what the cause of the delay is. And I think that doesn't benefit the people of the United States because they are watching this. They are looking to see what happens, and at the same time looking at what's going on in New York right now. I think it's important to get this case done before the election. It is going to have a detrimental effect to candidate Trump in trying to get around the country if it goes off sometime in June or July or August. If it doesn't go off in that period of time, there's going to be all kind of machinations about, it's being fixed, or, they're delaying it because she was appointed by President Trump. I just don't understand the delay in this one. And I think it's incumbent upon the court to at least explain it to somebody.
Keith, what does this do politically? Anything at all?
Say that again?
I said, what does this do politically? Anything at all for the campaign?
Guys, what I'm thinking is there's a reason for me to believe that Trump would be better off if this was adjudicated before the election, because this is a case that the American people, in my mind, whether they understand all the facts of the case or not, they see this as every administration having problems with files and keeping records, and they believe, again, whether it's fair or not, that this is much to do about nothing, and this is selective prosecution. I know about the argument, him taking too long. He was asked several times, ignored it. But I can tell you the polling pans out. Most people think we have better things for the federal judiciary and state judiciary to be doing than pursuing something that already has ended because he eventually returned the documents. So I actually think for the attention that it could shine on Trump being somewhat of a victim, it actually probably is better for the Democrats that they don't play this out before the election. That's just my take.
I think we should. I mean, I think it should be played out because I'm not disputing what you're seeing and what that perception might be, but that's a 40,000-foot flyover on oh, it's just some paper. He gave the paper back. Yeah, maybe he was a little obtuse in getting it back. That's just Donald Trump being Donald Trump. Get a trial date and listen to what the prosecutor says, and let's have the prosecutor tell the nation and the world exactly what it was he had at Mar-a-Lago, who he showed it to, and then his obtuse behavior more specifically, and the significance of the content of those documents and the potential effect it could have had, or God forbid already did have, on our international efforts at national security and global security. So, yeah, sure, they may be looking at it superficially right now, but you get a trial date and start looking at the substance of the prosecution's case, that opinion could change.
Well,
I'll go out on a ledge here. Even when they go through all the facts, the American people don't care. They don't care. They don't think it's an issue. You could put your best prosecution forward. They're going to think it's much ado about nothing. Select prosecution, and he'll play the victim like Barnum and Bailey across the country, and people will actually, be more inclined to support the former president than the latter. Trust me, as a Democrat, Jim, you don't want this adjudicated before the election.
Governor, you were going to say something.
He covered it.
Okay. All right. Well, that's that one. We'll take a break. We'll be back in just a moment.
Okay, don't finish the break yet. I can't hear Jim or this governor. I can barely hear. I can hear you crystal clear, but I can't. Maybe I'm 60 now, and at 60 you lose your hearing. It's less important to hear Jim because I never agree with Jim. Now,
turn the volume
but
up.
I don't even know how to respond. I'm like leaning into here because they're real faint, but you're crystal clear.
What are you using? A laptop?
Yeah. Why are you so clear and they're faint? That's what I don't understand.
Because I think we're going to have to get them different microphones.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Maybe. Do you have a hard time hearing them too?
No, I can hear them fine.
Oh, could you have a contraption?
Right.
Okay. I mean, I can hear a little
I'm
bit.
using a microphone like this. So.
Oh, I see.
Keith has been toned down to Democrats.
The volume up on your phone.
What did you say, Gov?
Look to see if you can move the volume up on your phone, on your
computer.
Yeah, but why would I hear Stacy so loud and then you two not?
Well,
you know what I mean?
Do me a favor. Just see if you can turn the volume up on your laptop.
There's a little speaker.
I said I have a speaker thing.
Right. Touch it, and you'll see a volume control.
Okay. Where's the button here? Okay.
Now I'll talk for you and see if you can hear it better. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Kevin. Okay, here, wait, Mike. Let's see what he says. Mike, you have a recording from now. All right, well, I can't find a volume control on my computer. It has a speaker, but I don't see a volume control. Oh, no, right up top, he has the volume all the way to the end, actually, now that I see it.
Okay.
Yeah, my microphone's all the way to the other end, so at least my mic is on hot. But I'll figure it out. I can hear you. It's just hard.
Okay.
It's just you're very light.
All right. We'll have to figure this out.
All right. Let's keep going.
Yeah. All right. There we go. Welcome back. President Trump has his legal issues, but President Biden has some troubles as well. The economy, of course, is the biggest issue he is probably facing going into the November election. But what about the protests over the Israeli action in the Gaza Strip? And also just maybe the division within the Democratic Party over what is happening in Israel. Let's see. Governor, why don't you take this one to start with and tell me what you think this might have or any impact at all on Biden's reelection campaign?
Well, if I were in President Biden's shoes, I could not have been happy about what happened with Hamas attacking Israel and what Israel's doing in response, because I think it does impede his chances of reelection because it is coming into this country and somewhat dividing his own base. Doing a lot of reading in national news, it seems to be the consensus that in a very close presidential election, which it is right now in the battleground states like Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. The race is very close. He can't afford to lose any part of his base, and his base, there's the Jewish component to his base, the young people component to his base, and you have the demonstrations going on campus, the pro-Palestinian demonstrations going on there. That doesn't help his reelection. The reaction to that doesn't help his reelection. The actions going on in Israel and Gaza right now do not help his reelection. I'm sure he wishes this would go away, but it's not going to go away. Those things are beyond your control. Somewhat, not quite the same, but if you go back to when we were young people, Jim, you were much younger, 1968, 69, 70, the protests on the campuses right then, but it was all about the war. Here, it is about Israel, about the Jews in Israel, and it's about Hamas, it's about the Muslim community. It's more complicated, and you have a new wave of young people who are protesting, and if you read some of the newspaper articles, they're protesting in a different way than those who protested in 68 and 69 were protesting. A lot of that has to do with technology. They're covering their faces when they protest. Their answer is, well, we don't want to be recognized through facial recognition because we want to be able to stay in school. Very different, but it doesn't help his campaign.
The issues in '68, yeah, I barely remember them, but I mean, but there, you can draw some analogies to that. I would think the issue of the war and the turmoil that was going on in '68, and in addition to the passage of the Civil Rights Act. Oh, thank you, Professor. They've
been joined by
crushing me.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm a little late to the party, Jim, but I know you can hold them off, buddy. I know that.
It's been, yeah. I mean,
he was just conceding.
Yeah, he had just turned Republican, Joe, when you stepped in.
This was the Gore concession speech, and you ran up the limousines.
And let me tell you two Republicans another thing. All right.
This is, by the way, for our listeners and our viewers, this is Joe Mystic. Joe's background includes, of course, consulting Democrats across the state of Pennsylvania, serving in city government, and you can read his thoughts on life and politics every weekend in the Tribune Review. Okay, welcome, Joe.
And he comes in on relief from time to time on different programs around the country. So they called him out of the bullpen.
They called him out of the bullpen for
a little late. I knew that Jim
signal out the window. And you know, it's
Joe. What we're talking about is we've already talked about the troubles that Donald Trump is facing in regards to this delay in the documents trial and possible problems for him. There's some disagreement on that, if you might expect. And then right now we're talking about the troubles that Joe Biden is facing, specifically related to the student protests and the division within the Democratic Party over how much support you give Israel and how much you don't give Israel over the invasion of the Gaza Strip. That's where we are. And so you can jump in at any time you'd like.
Sure. The problem with President Biden and the situation in Gaza is that you can't be for one side or the other. You have to be for both sides. And that opens you up to some pretty harsh political criticism, especially during campaign time. So he's in a very tight spot. I mean, if you're going to use diplomacy to try to resolve this, you're going to be vulnerable politically because the voters generally don't respond to nuances. They want some pretty definitive statements, and you just can't give that when you're trying to negotiate a peace settlement.
I love Ronald Reagan, but I'm almost tired of seeing the clips played out on social media and other platforms about how he handled protests in California. And really what it's about is they were teaching, it's a lesson in leadership. So one of the problems that President Biden has is people, the average American citizen, can perceive this as a leadership gap. Like, why are we not handling these protests? But the flip side of the coin, and I think it was articulated by both my colleagues across the aisle, was he has to tread softly. I mean, if he gets aggressive on this and acts like the leader that people like me want him to be, he turns off key parts of his base. His base it's a critical base. We all know we're in a divided America. I'm tired of hearing it 13 or 16 counties in America are going to decide this election. It's that close. We all believe it's that close. So there's a sensitivity there. But again, the buck stops with him, as Harry Truman said. He's the president of the United States. And if the temperature rises again, and when they come back right before the November vote, and this percolates again, it could be a real issue for him. And Stacy, I think off camera, you and I had a separate conversation about the Democratic convention in Chicago.
Yes.
I mean, that's a real. There has to be roundtable, big conference calls and Zoom calls saying, "Hey, we don't want a repeat of '68." And they got a very liberal. They got a very liberal mayor that's gonna allow protests. There's no way that they're gonna shut that down. So they got to manage this in advance, because it could play out in the national media and be another black eye for the incumbent president.
My prediction is how this is probably going to go, if indeed the protests continue at that time, is in 1968, as the governor, and Joe and I well remember, and Keith, you and Jim were a little bit younger at this time, but Mayor Daley is the one who really put the police out on against the protesters. And the protesters were not very nice either, to be honest with you. But, their billy clubs were swinging, and the networks took 18 minutes from the speech that was being given. I think it was Hubert Humphrey's speech, as a matter of fact, on the floor of the convention, to show what was going on in the streets. What may happen this time, because you raise a very good point, Keith, is that the mayor is a very much of a progressive. He's not inclined to put the police against the protesters. What I think will happen is, because you have so many progressives within the party already, you guys have been to conventions. Passes to get in the conventions are easily, accessed. If somebody wants to give you their pass, they will give them their pass, and you'll have protesters inside the convention hall this time, as opposed to outside the convention hall. That's my prediction. I'm probably wrong, but that's why I cover the news and not predict the news.
I have a faint recollection that inside the convention in '68 there was some protesting going on.
There was, but if you remember also, it was it was an ironclad situation there. I mean, you can remember Dan Rather being escorted out by security guards live on camera. I mean, it was
a little bit of pleasure out of that.
Yeah. It's I mean, that was great TV, to be honest with you.
My favorite moment is when Mayor Daley, and this is the old Richard Daley,
right.
Some folks remember his son more than the old Richard Daley, but my favorite image is of him giving the finger on live television to the protesters and to those who were speaking on behalf of the protesters. It was just great TV.
Yeah, we're talking a lot about the Democratic convention and all the progressive wing of the party working out there and being activists and protesting. Protesting is one thing, but vandalism is another. I don't care who it is protesting. You have other factions of our party that are pushing back on them, but it's all under the same Democratic tent, having a conversation about a very critical issue right now. And how does a president balance the needs of both sides? And when you try to balance in a crisis like this, both sides can get mad at you. I mean, that we're seeing a little bit of that right now in the polls. But let's talk about some predictions for the GOP summer convention. Yeah, as I continue to see one Republican leader after another endorsing Joe Biden or saying they could never vote for Donald Trump. Will the GOP national convention be in the same parking lot in Philadelphia that Rudy Giuliani had that press conference? Because it doesn't seem like there's much excitement over there. And if it's half as embarrassing as the one that Donald Trump had in 2016 or 2020, let's talk about that side of the coin for a second. Because
well, you know what?
A broken party right now.
All right, you're leading.
The two gentlemen sitting here excluded from my comment, but there's a serious problem going on over there with that nominee and the depressive effect he has on turnout on the GOP side.
Okay, you're leading me into our next section. I'm going to take a quick break here, and we'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back to Trunkin Tales, our initial edition of this, and Jim Byrne just brought up a very good point I was going to discuss, and this has to do with the Pennsylvania primary. Trump pulled in 83.5% of the Republican primary vote. He lost, though, 16% to Nikki Haley, who is no longer in the race. So I'll throw this out. Keith, I'm going to direct it toward you. Is this now a problem for Trump, as if you take in Jim Byrne's comments as well?
I don't think there's a problem where those votes are going to go to Biden. There's really not swing Democrats. There could be an undervote. And I've been talking off camera with all you gentlemen individually for months about the fact that I think the undervote is going to be dramatic. And quite frankly, I think that issue is going to be a bigger problem for the incumbent than the challenger. I think there's a lot of people when I see his health and his vitality 4 years ago during the campaign and during the debates and on television, the president was a very different individual than he is now. The weight of the office has worn him down physically and mentally, and it's played out on television on a daily basis. And I think there's a lot of Democrats that could never, in good conscience, vote for Donald Trump, but they might go to the polls and either throw a vote to Kennedy or vote the Don ticket and skip president, but also in good conscience can't think about giving this person in diminished mental capacity and physical capacity another 4 years in office. So the numbers that we saw, these historic numbers in 20, we might see historic numbers again, but I have a feeling you're going to see a serious undervote for president in both parties.
Yeah, as for President Biden, that feeble argument worked up until the State of the Union address, where he just kicked butts and took names.
Yeah, you let him rest 3 days.
Yeah. Well, he just really.
You can't rest 3 days. You got to do your bidding every day as president.
A lot of things happen in 3 days. You know what I mean?
He rests at home. Donald Trump rests in a court.
They even admitted they rested him for 3 days.
In their teeth. Right in their teeth. Everything they did.
Trust me, everybody knows we're laughing about it.
Professor, he doesn't get his
performance. I think you're a little jealous.
He doesn't.
Your guy's still talking about and stuff like that.
It's better to sit at home. Right? It's better to sit at home and catch your breath than to sit in court while Stormy testifies.
Okay.
Governor, you haven't said anything for a while.
Oh, I'm just having fun watching this. But I will say this. I think there will be an undervote. I also think that because of the extremes of the two parties, we have seen here in Pennsylvania a movement for people to become independent voters. And it's almost 1 million people now in Pennsylvania are independent voters. Two things. One, I truly believe, and I talk to the Republicans as much as I can, Pennsylvania needs to go to an open primary. Like the vast majority of the rest of the states, we're one of only 2 states that have a closed primary this way, because then the Democrats need this too. The extremes will not have as much control as they do right now within the party apparatus and what's going on. But secondly, you don't know where those independents are going to go. And when I look at it, and I've talked to people who have said that they can't vote for either person, and these are independents. They say, I can't vote for either one, so I'm not going to go and vote. I said, whoa, you got to go vote. You don't have to vote for president if you don't want to, but we need your votes down in the statewide offices and the
U.S. Senate race,
the congressional races, the state Senate, and the state House races. You need to vote there. So I think having 2, frankly, elderly candidates at the top of the ticket is going to suppress the vote.
That's going, and then it gets into a ground game, guys. We know the deal. It gets into the coordinated campaigns in each state. It gets into the retail politics. It gets into that micro targeting, like Keith said. If it is really true that there's 13 counties, you're going to go scratch for every vote. You're going to go door to door. And the better ground game and the better comms team will be the ones that should prevail. And so that's, especially if there's going to be a suppressed vote. I know in Pennsylvania, the coordinated campaign has been up and running for some time now. Knowing who our front runners were going to be, Bob Casey and Joe Biden, was significantly helpful. The row offices, there was some contests in 2 out of 3. but that wasn't driving this. The coordinated campaigns coming together. Bob Casey is going all over the state raising money for the campaigns, the coordinated campaigns. The legwork that's been done in Pennsylvania, not just Philly and Allegheny County, but the rural caucus that formed 10 years ago when our team was there, that's been building up. So instead of Philly and Allegheny having to carry all the weight like it used to be, you close those margins in the T, the Tiogas, the Sullivans, the Bradfords. A low turnout or a suppressed vote with a better ground game in an organized state party, whether it's Pennsylvania or somewhere else, could make the difference.
Well, we're five pretty smart guys politically. We've been around the block of so many times it's a circle. We've worn down the edges. But when you look at the historic nature of the first presidential election in American history, where more people call themselves independents than either Democrats or Republicans, it answers the question we're debating. I mean, when they get a call, the reason that they identify themselves as an independent as a Democrat or an independent as a Republican, because they're not comfortable with the standard bearer of their own party. And they're not going to identify as Republican because they're dissatisfied with Trump, or vice versa. They're disappointed in the incumbent president and they say, I'm an independent, like it's a badge of honor. Like the governor said, I'm not for either one of them. So it's a very popular thing to say I'm independent. And it just tells you that the majority of the American people are not looking forward to this rematch.
Okay, let me ask this question, and I don't know if anybody has the answer to it, and that is, of the people who have now declared themselves independent, are they coming equally from both parties, or more from the Republican side, or more on the Democratic side?
I haven't seen that number. That's a good question.
Yeah,
I know that number's out there, but I have not seen it. And it may go state to state or year to year or issue to issue, campaign to campaign. That would drive people away from one party into the independent.
Well, reason I bring this up is because, Jim, you have said many times, and Joe, you agree with I think what Jim says, and that is, in essence, the Democratic Party, while it has its divisions, when it comes time to casting the ballot, you're going to vote Democrat. I mean, it's whether you're a progressive or whether you're a moderate Democrat, you're going to go in, and even though you may not like the progressive, you're going to vote for the Democrat over a Republican, or sit on your hands. I'm not quite sure that's the same case in this election year for the Republicans, that they're just going to go in in fact, as the governor has said, people have said they're just not even going to vote. So
Look,
I'm wondering
let me say this about the governor's comments. As all of us, I have spent my life as a fervent believer in a strong two-party system. I believe in parties. I believe that the strength of America has come from that struggle that we go through every 4 years for the president, every 2 years for members of Congress, and at the local level. I just believe that that's what's produced our greatness, our ability to excel. I'm not sure I believe that anymore. I don't know that there are parties anymore as there once were. We have to deal with a progressive wing, which appears to be fairly stable, but problematic for what we would call traditional Democrats. And the Republicans have to deal with the far right and the MAGAs. The traditional Republicans don't find themselves all that compatible with that crowd. And I think the governor's proposal is the solution. I'm not sure that the two parties are really doing what they have done for us historically anymore, and that we have to let the independents come in and force the candidates to be sensible and move towards the middle from both ends of the spectrum.
And actually, bring their members back, because I read the numbers a month or so ago. Both parties lost registration, and you saw an increase in the independents in Pennsylvania. So people said, enough is enough. I'm going to go to the middle. And as we know, we have the far right and we have very moderate people. Depends on where you are in the state. The same thing with the Democrats. There's a split. There's a split in labor at the blue collar street level. There's a split there where some labor, the trades unions and stuff, support Republican candidates. I was a beneficiary.
I don't want to lose sight on the fact that there is the people identifying as independents, but not necessarily registered independents, because it's not the same.
Right.
People have not moved dramatically to registering independent. They've moved to identifying as independents. The fact is, Pennsylvania is one of the 7 states in America where the last 4 years we've registered more new Republicans
Yes.
than any time in our history. So the uptick, according to the Republican National Committee, is the largest surge of Republican registration has come during the Biden administration of any time in their history. Now, these same people, when pushed, or now that we've decided on the 2 nominees, still could be telling pollsters, I'm independent because I'm dissatisfied with this matchup again. But the actual numbers of people registered independents is not as big as we think. It's the number identifying as independents to pollsters.
Interesting point. All right, gentlemen, thank you so much for our discussion today on Trunk and Tails. I want to thank Keith Schmidt, Governor Corbett, Jim Byrne, and Joe Mystic for joining us, even if he came in late just for the rescue of Jim Byrne at that point in time. Yeah.
He didn't need to be rescued.
Jim was holding his own.
He holds his own.
Oh, that's great. We will continue our look at politics in this pivotal election year in our future episodes. Right now, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again next time.
Everybody stay online. Don't turn it off. Okay.
I'm going